All right, great. So SmartLogic, we're a custom web and mobile software shop here in Baltimore. We support a number of kind of small startup applications, and recently we took one of them from a couple Linodes to a more robust Amazon infrastructure, and so that's what we're going to talk about. Development on this app started in spring of 2011, and we deployed it that following August. Since then, we've done some updates. We've kept dependencies up to date, but we haven't really rethought how it's deployed to the cloud. So it's a basic Rails app. It's got some staging, training, sandbox, kind of your normal environments. We had one dedicated production node and one node just for Postgres and Elasticsearch. The initial provisioning of that app was kind of manual. We used Capistrano to deploy the app. We eventually moved to Chef and still use Capistrano. And we kind of stayed with that setup for a while. It worked well, but we were ready for something more. So this is the infrastructure we ended up with. So now we have a load balancer. We've got 2 production nodes, some dedicated RDS instances, and then all of our smaller environments now have their own dedicated node. And so now we feel like we have the room to grow with our client. The data migration went really well. The database was small. We didn't have a whole lot going on there. We had some static resources that were still on disk. Doesn't work well when you load balance. Huh? So this was kind of our first big build out using Terraform. We really enjoyed it. It was really easy to see kind of everything written out, really easy to understand what was going on. We were able to break the configuration down into logical components. So we have a file that just covers all of our subnets, a file for all of our security groups, a file dedicated to the production resources, staging resources, things like that. It was really easy to comprehend. We've also been using Ansible instead of Chef more recently. It just fits most of our use cases a lot better. We have a lot of roles that we now kind of pull from project to project, mostly around monitoring and support, just so we have consistency across the applications we're maintaining. Some app configuration oversights that we had had moved to database URLs for RDS, and so our Rails configuration, we kind of left out the whole database pool size problem. We also had some API keys that were tied specifically to an IP address, so we had to make some changes there. From an app configuration standpoint, we had logos that got moved into S3, but those URLs weren't public. Makes it really hard for them to show up in emails, so we had to make some changes to that after deployment. For Terraform, I think the biggest snag we've run into is just like forgetting to make sure your keys are in your SSH agent when you start kicking things off. We were using a provisioning step to install Python, which also fails every so often on 1804. From a network standpoint, we kind of learned that lesson that we probably knew at one point, which is that a PG restore sends data uncompressed to your Postgres instance. So you definitely want to do that inside your AWS infrastructure. Otherwise, it will just take forever. RDS was probably the biggest adjustment we had. Our demonstration server rebuilds itself every night from a PG dump. And if you're not running as a super user, there's certain things like comments you can't do. So we had to learn about table of contents on a PG restore. From Elasticsearch in multiple workers, so now we had 2 production nodes, which we just weren't in the mindset of. And we didn't divide and conquer our index rebuilding across those 2 nodes. So we could have saved some time if we'd been in a better mindset. From load balancing security group standpoint, making sure that you're really thinking about where data is flowing, not just into the load balancer, but out of the load balancer and between the load balancer and the nodes. We didn't quite have our security groups configured correctly to start with. For this kind of project, I really recommend using Trello to organize everything that you're trying to do. The checklists make things really easy. The whole team can be on the same page as far as how you're preparing for this actual migration. And it just keeps everybody kind of organized so that you can have as little downtime as possible. When planning out this kind of project, we definitely focused on the smaller, less critical environments to begin with. And we expected some trip-ups with RDS. We didn't really know what to expect, but at least knowing that that was where we were probably going to have trouble was really helpful. As far as the tools used, we had really good experience with Terraform, with Ansible, and we're still relying on Capistrano for Rails app deployment because it really just is kind of a great way to deploy a Rails application. And then finally, just be retrospective. The day after we did this deployment, we gave an internal lunch talk, got the team up to date on how it went, covered some of these lessons learned. Really, just a big benefit to the team as a whole. So write down what you learn and share it. Thank you.